Hello and welcome to Read Becca. So I'm kind of struggling energy-wise today, but it's super hot and humid out, so I don't think that's a complaint that is uncommon by any means. I think everybody is struggling with the same, but definitely it has kind of sucked the life out of me. However, we had a gorgeous week here. All of the weekdays, it was kind of mid to low 80s and breezy and just glorious weather. So I got a lot of reading done because I was outside, just sitting outside. I took my cat out and sat and read over lunch every day, which is very unusual, especially August here, super atypical. And then I walked my dog a whole bunch, so I spent a ton of time outside. And when I do that, I read on my phone or my Kindle as well when I'm walking the dog. So lots of reading. So I finished a bunch of stuff. And July actually was my best reading month ever that I've tracked. So I'm hoping I will continue on with that. I'm very surprised, honestly. So in July, I read 22 things and so that tied my previous highest number of book count. And then I read almost 6,000 pages. So very high. And that was by far my highest page count. So really exciting. And I think the only real difference that I can see is that I am a little bit slower of an e-reader, and I have been reading via e-reader for the past year and primarily reading via e-reader through that time. And so now I'm transitioning back into print, and I thought I had just gotten faster at reading e-reading, but it seems like maybe I didn't, and maybe I still am much faster at reading print. So I think I'm maybe using the same amount of time and just reading faster now that I'm almost entirely reading on print. So on to the books and not the metagaming of the reading. Sorry, I had to pause there for my lovely assistant Ripley to help her out. So my first book I have is Soul Lanterns by Kuzuki, and translated from Japanese by Emily Balistrieri. And this one is all about the after effects of Hiroshima, the bombing obviously, and we follow young characters, so this is technically a YA, but there's not really anything that overly makes it YA other than it having young protagonists and being written fairly simply. But really, they realize that there are all these kind of holes in people's lives of people they're grieving that disappeared from the bombing, and there were no bodies to bury in so many cases. And so it tackles the grieving process when you don't have a body to bury, and how so many people are still hoping, like holding out hope that their family members, their loved ones are going to return somehow, and it's been years afterward. And so they start going around and collecting people's stories of these people that they lost, and they're doing it as a project, kind of a cultural celebration for their school. And it really gets to the core of how during this time, during the war, there was the shutdown of arts and music. And because those gave empathy for others and would have broken down kind of the hatred that was being fostered. And in fact, as part of this project, they're building that empathy and trying to make connections with people, and it shows how critical and key arts and music are to telling those stories and to having empathy for others and creating a shared connection. So I loved this. I think it was perfect for Women in Translation Month. So I'm so glad I picked this up. Next up, I picked up Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom by Cory Doctorow. But this is set in a far future where we've overcome death, basically, and back up our memories so that they can be downloaded into clones, right? And so people are effectively immortal. They're living for thousands of years. There have been changes in currency, and yet somehow they're still maintaining Disney World. So this is all about this character who lives at Disney World, and he is shot and attacked by someone, and they kind of stage a coup to take over one of the attractions and start running it. So he's trying to figure out who actually shot him and why. And so it's got that mystery element, but then there is also this whole battle between them over the attractions and running the attractions that seems very pseudo anti-capitalist. And it's weird because the two factions that we're talking about, they're angry at this other faction for kind of taking over this ride and turning it into something sterile and functional for the money. But then their claim is that, oh, we're going to make this amazing, like, personal experience, but they're also doing it for the money. So it doesn't quite get there. So I think this would have been immensely revolutionary had I read it when it came out in the early 2000s, but now it seems a little stale and dated, and it has a lot of rule of cool type elements where it's clearly going over the top. So I think if you like maybe Ready Player One, this is that sort of thing where it's very loud, over the top, very much appealing to your entertainment. So overall, I did enjoy it. I think it's not my favorite of Doctorow's work by any means, but it was good to finally have read it. Then I started and finished To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers this morning, and I was so glad I got through this. I thought it was going to take a lot longer because I was really, like I said, I had kind of a low energy day, so it took me forever to get through the first 40 pages, and I was like, this is going to take me a couple days. And then I started flying through. So this follows a crew of a spaceship who are being sent out by a civilian-run group, or a private-run group that is basically sending out crews just to explore space for the wonder of exploration. And so I enjoyed that aspect a lot. I really liked that. I liked the kind of hard science take on that. But one thing I would say, so this struck me so similar to a space opera by Catherynne Valenti. And what so many people don't like about Catherynne Valenti's book is that it's kind of a lot of non sequiturs to just explore world building, really alien planets and aliens. And that's what this seems like it is. But with space opera, that's also what people love about the book. So either you love it or you hate it kind of thing. This is a much more literal take, and it's not quite as stylized as Catherynne Valenti's space opera, but it strikes me as very much the same thing, where they're kind of traveling between these planets to explore what the new creatures and things they can find, what scientific discovery they can make, and it's very much about the wonder of discovery. And there is a philosophical element toward the end, but not as much. It's really just about the weird discoveries. So I liked that a lot. I love space opera. I love this for the same reasons. So that's my take on it, I think. I have not read any of Becky Chambers' standalone work before, and so this was, I think, a great place to start, because I definitely got the, not quite cozy, but kind aspects that a lot of people talk up from Chambers' work, and so I think I will definitely be exploring more of it. And finally, this one I blazed through over the course of this week. This was what I was reading over my lunch hours every day. The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnott. I adored this. This was so good. This is, for some reason I thought this was a contemporary, and it's really not. It's very definitely speculative. So at the beginning, it starts with a fable before the actual book begins, and it's the fable of this rain heron, right? And so I don't want to say too much about the plot, because uncovering it is really what is so good. And so to start off, we have this woman who has kind of fled civilization and lives in the mountains, isolated. She's kind of a survivalist. And so then this small band of soldiers has started tracing through the mountains that she's surviving in, and they don't really care about this, but it's their mission to go seek out this mythic rain heron that, everybody is like, that's a fable, right? So I think that's all I will say about the plot. As far as the setting and kind of the speculativeness, there is a definite thread through that we get hints that something weird has happened in civilization outside. So the plot of this really takes place in very remote areas. So we don't actually go into the civilization, but everything is telling us that things are going wrong outside of where we are. So, and I think that's all I'll say. But this is told in several parts, in 4 parts, and each part is basically a different perspective. And as we go through these different perspectives, they're very layered. I think 3 of them are kind of told at the same time, and then 1 is in the past. And 2 of those parts are really from the same person, but their view has shifted so far that they're basically on opposing sides at 2 different time points. So that is a really interesting element. But then we also have, in this absurd story that is being told, this kind of abstracted from what is actually being told to us, we're getting a story of trauma, the cycle of trauma, and the way that people perpetuate trauma onto others when they've been through trauma, and overcoming and breaking the cycle of trauma is really where we get to in this. And it's very interesting. So that character that we kind of get 2 opposing perspectives from, we see them as, I don't know if victim is the right word, but they are very much the victim of trauma in the first part, and then they later perpetrate trauma onto someone else, the same type of trauma. And so we see this mirrored, but in both cases, there is damage to them as a result of the trauma, whether they're the victim or the perpetrator. And that was so interesting and so kind of intimately told. And so I thought that exploration was incredible. So I feel like this is like mentally going to be a 5-star because it's going to really hang on with me. It's stick in my mind. But there were a couple of things that just really didn't work, and not like, it's speculative, so there are things that are just not real. And you have to kind of accept that. But there are things as far as like rational things that I was just like, oh, okay, you know, how did he get there? You know, that kind of thing. So you have to suspend that, but overall, I absolutely love this. I flew through it. So love this book. I will be looking out, I think Robbie Arnott only has 1 other book, but I will be for sure picking it up. Then I picked up or continued Shadow of the Wind, and last weekend I actually managed to read twice as much as I intended. I've been targeting 50 pages a week, but I actually read 100, so I've only got 100 pages left on this. So hopefully I will be done with this shortly. I want to read a little bit this weekend, maybe not my full 50 pages, because I've got a lot backed up. So I think that's all that I had previously. And then on audio, I also read Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky, which was so good. I loved it on audio. So I haven't loved all the Rick Riordan Presents audios. Like Arusha did not work for me at all on audio. This one, Tristan Strong and City of the Plague God, were just absolutely phenomenal on audio. So the character, as always happens in these books, the young kid awakens a great evil and then has to, you know, go stop it. But he ends up in this alternate dimension where fables and folklore characters are real from the American South. And so he kind of shows up and is like accosted by this little character, Gum Baby, who is so entertaining and snarky and has a very sharp tongue. So Gum Baby was hilarious. But so he ends up having to fix the damage that he's done, essentially. And that's the pretty standard plot. But what really made this was the characterization. Like every character that's around him, they're big personalities without feeling massively over the top, if you kind of get what I mean. And so that is really what I love. The characters and the world building were so on point for this that I enjoyed it so much. So when I finished that, I started up the audiobook of Beowulf, a new translation, translated by Maria Dahvana Headley. And so I think that kind of fits in with Women in Translation Month. We obviously don't know who the author was, but presumably it was a man. But we have a female translator. So I loved the introduction to this. So far it is very interesting. I actually got a couple of hours through it today because my driving around ended up taking a lot longer than I would have liked. But the intro is so well done because she spends the time explaining why it's absurd to even try for a literal translation of Beowulf, and the challenges to that, and then just kind of explains how much of a nerd about this she is. Like, she has been obsessed with Beowulf for years and years, and so this was very much a passion project for her. So I highly recommend doing that because, like, she actually does the intro herself. And then the narration is so good. It comes across almost like spoken word poetry. So I'm enjoying that. I'm not sure that the mix is quite right in terms of the modern language and kind of more formal language, but I am enjoying it. It kind of makes me think of like 10 Things I Hate About You, how that really brought the story of Taming of the Shrew into the particular moment that it was made in. So you know that is a film of its time. This is very much of its time as well. I think it's an interesting thought experiment, really, for what it means to translate this work, and so I'm enjoying that a ton. Then, as far as new stuff, so I picked up a couple of things. So first up, I had a hold on this. This is a brand new release, What Strange Paradise by Omar Akkad. And Akkad wrote American War, and I've wanted to pick that up, but considering it came out in a time when it's based on a new American Civil War, right? It came out in a time when that was a very real possibility, and that was very heavy, and I just have not gotten around to picking it up because of that. So this one is also not a very light book, so I'm just going to read this very quickly. More bodies have washed up on the shores of a small island. Another overfilled, ill-equipped, dilapidated ship has sunk under the weight of too many passengers. Syrians, Ethiopians, Egyptians, Lebanese, Palestinians, all of them desperate to escape untenable lives back in their homelands. But miraculously, someone has survived the passage. 9-year-old Amir, a Syrian boy who is rescued by Dahvana. Dahvana is a teenage girl who, despite being native to the island, experiences her own sense of homelessness in a place and among people she has come to disdain. And though Dahvana and Amir are complete strangers, though they don't speak a common language, Dahvana is determined to do whatever it takes to save the boy. So this is about two kids living on an island where refugee bodies wash up. Sounds really enlightening. So then I picked up, I actually went to a different library than my usual branch and almost came out with an armful of stuff, but I really restrained myself. But I specifically went to pick up Finna. I have been wanting to read this since it came out, and I can't read the back because there's a big sticker on it. So this is like speculative, weird people who have to follow an old woman through a wormhole out of an IKEA type place. So should be very fun. I'm looking forward to it. And finally, I'm really excited for this one. This is another pretty small one. I grabbed a bunch of small stuff. So this is At Night, All Blood is Black by David Diop, and this is translated from the French by Anna Moshavakis. This won the Booker International, or was shortlisted for the Booker International, and has sounded really interesting. So translated works have been a big theme for me recently, not like by any intention, I just have been picking up a ton of them. We'll see if I can, we'll read this. Alpha Ndiaye is a Senegalese man who finds himself fighting as a so-called chocolat soldier with the French army during World War I. When his village friend Mademba Diop is mortally wounded in battle, Mademba begs Alpha to kill him and spare him the pain of a long death in no man's land. But Alpha can't bring himself to strike down a man who is like a brother to him, and Mademba dies in agony. Faced with what he comes to see as his own cowardice and cruelty, Alpha begins to lose touch with reality. Anxious to avenge the death of his friend and find forgiveness for himself, he adopts a macabre, nocturnal ritual. He sneaks across enemy lines every night to find and kill a blue-eyed German soldier, and every night he returns to base unharmed with his victim's severed hand. At first, Alpha's comrades admire his ingenuity, but rumors soon circulate that the super soldier isn't a hero, but a sorcerer, a devourer of souls. Plans are hatched to get Alpha away from the front and separate him from his growing collection of hands before his apparent psychosis affects morale. But how does one reason with a demon, and how far will Alpha go to make amends to his dead friend? So this one sounds very, very dark, harrowing, and intriguing. And I think this will be very interesting coming after the Rain Heron, because it seems like they have kind of similar themes of that cycle of trauma and violence. And so that'll be very intriguing. So I think this one will probably be a couple weeks away from me getting to it. And I'm always shocked, like this recently was up for that prize, and you know, it seems like the Booker International, for whatever reason, doesn't have people rushing to get things like a lot of other awards, which is wild because all of the books I've ever read from that long list are always really good. So I'm excited about all of those. So as far as my week, like I mentioned, lots of time spent outside, so I will insert some wildlife footage, animal footage, because we got a lot of that. As far as watching stuff, I finished up Big Little Lies, and I don't think I'm going to continue on past the first season. It was okay, and I think I got sufficient closure and confirmation of things I already suspected at the end of season 1, so I may go on to read the book. It seemed interesting enough that I might, but I definitely am going to watch 9 Perfect Strangers. That I do want to continue and see some of the author's other work. So otherwise, my day was a little overwhelming today, I think, because I was cat sitting again today, and on my way back, I had wanted to stop at, we have this big park where there's a couple museums and the zoo and the science center, and I was gonna go through and go to one of the museums because I have kind of an idea of something to tie in with a book. And so I was gonna go there, and I drove through, and it's a huge, huge park, so if there's traffic, it's crazy to try and go through. So I went to try and go to this museum, and ended up, there was traffic. There were loads of people just streaming back and forth into the museum, and so I didn't even stop. I just drove in a loop around the park, and so that ended up adding like a half hour onto my time. And then I went to this other library to pick up Finna, and unfortunately the road on the way to the library on one side was closed. So I wound up having to completely like detour and go all around. So that added about another half hour. So I wasted an extra hour today in the heat, and I was miserable. And so my day feels like it has slipped away from me. So I'm surprised I've read as much as I have already today. So I think I'm going to get some more reading done this afternoon, but I've got other chores to take care of, and the kind of medical stuff I have to do for the pets. So I've got to take care of that, and then we're gonna take a little break. I'm not sure. I'm kind of almost feeling like a nap today. But I do really want to tomorrow get to taping at least a bookshelf tour. It's probably going to be a very fast one where I'm not going to pull out every book because I have way too many. But I'm really committed to getting that done, hopefully this weekend. And then that's going to take a ton of editing, I'm sure. So I will probably try to film a super long video and then edit it over the next week or so. And then next weekend is the massive giant charity book sale that I've been looking forward to for months. So that is probably going to wear me out because it's always very, very hot, and they have actually moved locations for it even farther away. So it's going to be like a 40-minute drive each way to get there. So I don't know how exhausted I'm going to be. I may or may not do a weekend update next week because of that. So you know what's going on, but I'm sure I will do other stuff. I may try to do just a quick check-in or show a video if I'm there and it's like massive. But I will for sure have a very large haul coming after that, because I will go at least once, maybe twice. So I think the only thing I have to recommend for this week, Sarah Reeds did a really great, in-depth, deep dive into Neil Gaiman's work for new readers coming in to check out his backlist. And she just broke it down so well. I mean, she made lists kind of topically and explored exactly where you might want to go based on your tastes. So I'm gonna link that down below for sure, because that was a really great resource if you're a new reader trying to get into his work, or really, his work is so different and varied. If you've tried him before but didn't like a book, he may have a whole other set of books that are for you. So definitely check out her video. So I think that is it for my weekend. Thank you so much for watching. Look at that happy tail. Are you enjoying being outside? What in the world are you doing? You are not being frightened enough. Hi. You're supposed to run away. Don't you know that? Hello, tiny bun. What's this guy doing?